In contrast to what has been typical for professional musicians through the ages, Franz Joseph Haydn's career, after an early period of struggle, was distinguished by its security, longevity, and consistent artistic growth. He spent most of his professional life in the employ of the Esterhazys, a Hungarian noble family dating back to the Middle Ages. First hired in 1761, Haydn's tenure at the Esterhazy court was largely defined by his service as court music master to Prince Nicholas Esterhazy between 1762 and 1790. Each workday he arose, put on the livery that was the standard uniform for court officials, and consulted with his master about the establishment's musical needs. Nicholas was a passionate music lover who engaged the finest available musicians for his orchestra. This ensemble became a musical laboratory that Haydn would use to establish himself as the primary architect of genres such as the symphony and the string quartet. The composer was also responsible for meeting the personal musical needs of the sovereign. Among the many items in Haydn's catalog are 126 trios for the baritone, a now obscure string instrument similar to a viol that was Nicholas' favorite. Although Haydn sometimes found his duties onerous, these concerns were quelled by memories of the poverty he'd experienced for much of his youth. By convention and contractual arrangement, the music Haydn wrote for the Esterhazys was the property of the court. This changed in 1779, when he renegotiated his contract and won the right to compose for others and sell his music for publication. Works that were of particular interest to European publishers, such as symphonies and string quartets, began to dominate his output, which displayed new levels of creative sophistication. In the words of the musicologist David Jones, this new contract acted as a catalyst in the next stage in Haydn's career, the achievement of international popularity. By 1790, the year of Prince Nicholas' death, Haydn was in the paradoxical position of being Europe's leading composer, even though he'd spent his time as a duty-bound Kapellmeister in a remote palace in the Hungarian countryside. Nicholas was succeeded by Prince Anton, who didn't share his father's enthusiasm for music. With the Austrian economy in recession, he laid off most of the court's musicians, cut Haydn's salary, and made him a part-time employee. These developments were in fact propitious. Freed from the demands of daily work obligations, he began to travel and concertize, visiting London between 1791 and 92, and again during the 1794-95 season. Hailed as the world's greatest living composer in the capital of a rapidly expanding empire, Haydn made these visits productive. The fees he earned secured his finances for the rest of his life, and at the behest of the London impresario Johann Peter Salomon, he wrote his final 12 symphonies, which are collectively considered his greatest achievement in the form. Haydn also attended performances of Handel's oratorios, where he was overwhelmed by the rhetorical power and ingenuity of the music and astonished that a composer could reach the status of a national hero. These live encounters with Handel's music had an enormous impact on the great choral works Haydn composed during his final creative period, which include his oratorios The Creation and the Seasons, as well as 6 masses. This interest in large-scale vocal works was also facilitated by the ascension in 1794 of Nicholas II to the Esterhazy throne, who arranged for Haydn to compose a mass each year to celebrate the birthday of his wife. Haydn's Mass No. 11 in D minor was premiered on September 23, 1798, and is widely known as the Lord Nelson Mass, a designation attached to the piece by the public, which heard in the work's martial echoes a connection with Admiral Horatio Nelson's recent defeat of Napoleon in the Battle of the Nile. In fact, Haydn's title for the work, Mass for Troubled Times, refers to the turmoil into which Austria had been plunged as Napoleon's armies ravaged much of Central Europe. Its unusual, militaristic-sounding instrumentation of strings, trumpets, and timpani was born of necessity, as the woodwind players at the Esterhazy court had all been sent away to fight in the war. Nonetheless, this Mass is widely considered to be one of Haydn's greatest works, a summation of his artistry in which his impeccable craftsmanship is bolstered by a highly flexible, transcendent level of creative imagination. Although this largest of Haydn's Masses is also the only one to which he assigned a minor key, much of the work is dominated by an atmosphere of jubilation that reflected the composer's joy in his religious faith, a spirit he described to a colleague with his usual clarity and directness. At the thought of God, my heart leaps for joy, and I cannot help my music doing the same.